Hello out there, and welcome to the Sonora Writers Group YouTube channel. We have a special guest today, author Sydney Avey, and she's going to be telling us and sharing with us her story of the trials of Nellie Belle. And Sydney, here.
Okay. Well, the trials of Nellie Belle tell the story of my great-grandmother, who was the first female court reporter to travel the Northwest on the legal circuit. She went into small towns and small courts with the judges and attorneys in a day when women didn't do that. Women didn't really work out of the house. So this tells the story of how that came to be. You know, Jill, people these days seem to be writing a lot of family stories. And I think part of that is that because a couple generations ago, our forebears the women went through the progressive era where it became obvious that they could do more than just cook and sew if they chose to. But they were trailblazers, and they really blazed that trail for us. These days it seems as if a lot of memoirs are being written and a lot of historical fiction is being written because these are precious family stories. And we now have the resources of Ancestry.com, the internet, to go back and verify some of what we heard around the dinner table growing up. And so these are precious stories that we can leave our families. Let me read to you out of one of the stories. Well, first of all, let me tell you, my grandmother wrote about the experiences that she had in the courts and in life, and I inherited her short stories. And so that has been grist for this mill. One of the things I discovered was that my grandmother, Nellie Belle was my great-grandmother, Nellie Belle's daughter, left home to go on the stage in New York when she was 16 years old. That is something we don't encourage our girls to do these days, but she did that with her mother's blessing. And so this scene that I'm going to talk about, Nellie has just gotten her job, and she's just celebrated that with a dinner with her daughter. They're living on their own in a hotel in Spokane, Washington. It was common for women to live in hotels those days, women who worked, because it was professional, it was safety for them. So Nellie is about to take her first trip for work. She's going to get on a train. A month after their celebration dinner, Nellie fastened the strap on her train bag and slipped an arm into her heavy tweed motor coat. Opal followed her to the door. "How long will you be gone?" Nellie cupped her hand under Opal's chin. "Such a long face." She moved her daughter's face side to side. "But a clean one." She tapped her on the nose. "I should be back in 2 or 3 weeks. Walk me to the train station?" Dawn light greeted them as their feet hit the pavement outside the hotel. The streets began filling with men and women on their way to work. Motor cars pulled up to the curbs and took their places in a stationary parade that would line the streets all day. Nellie and Opal began the 3-block walk to the station. The closer they came to the moment Nellie would board the Northern Pacific passenger train, the more Opal began to object. "I've never been left on my own for so long." Nellie kept walking. "We talked about this, Opal." She did not turn to look at her daughter's face. "You said you'd be fine, and you will. I raised you to be independent. You're almost grown. Besides, I'll only be gone a few days." Opal slowed her pace. What if a distant rumble on the tracks prompted a flurry of activity? A clanging bell charged the air with excitement. The stately train pulled into view. Brakes screeched and hissed. Trainmen, porters, and passengers spilled from the train. Opal's apprehensions were all but lost in the scamper and the noise. Nellie found her car and hefted her train bag up onto the first step. She turned to look at Opal. She threw out an arm, and the girl came running. Nellie drew her in for a quick hug and leaned over to brush her lips across Opal's ear. "This will be good practice for you before you go to New York," she whispered in a gravelly voice. "Jessie has promised she'll check on you." Passengers lined up behind Nellie and began to push. Nellie released Opal and climbed aboard. On the landing, she turned and handed her bag to the porter, blew Opal a kiss, and entered the coach. Once inside, she found a seat by a window and drew the curtain across the pane. A large, matronly woman sitting across the aisle looked to be the type to discourage idle conversation. Good. Nellie welcomed the long hours of solitude ahead of her. She peeked through the side of the curtain and watched Opal stand by the tracks until the last passenger boarded. When Opal finally turned to go, Nellie leaned her elbow on the windowsill, rested her head against the palm of her hand, and closed her eyes. "This will be good for Opal. She'll be fine. God, let her be fine." Lulled by the rhythmic jostling of the train, Nellie drifted in and out of sleep. She was awakened by the conductor, who asked for her ticket. "All the way to Butte, Montana." He positioned his punch over her ticket and pronounced Butte with 2 syllables as he punched a hole in her destination. A chatty sort, he followed up with commentary. "Butte, Montana, a mine of opportunity for some." He twisted the tip of his handlebar mustache. "A pit of toil and trouble for some others." He winked at her and walked down the aisle. "I'll make mine opportunity," Nellie chuckled to herself and settled back into her seat. Hours passed, and her peace was interrupted only when stops and starts jolted her awake. Whenever the train picked up speed and cantered through mountain passes, she pulled back window curtains and peered out. Sheer joy spread through her being. If there was a fountain of youth, this was it. "I am 44 years old today. I have never been on my own, not for one moment." Nellie reached into the satchel that held personal items and the tools of her trade. She pulled out a special treat, tied up with a red and white checkered napkin. Almost reverently, she unwrapped the indulgence she had purchased for just this occasion. It lay glistening on the napkin in her lap. A devil's food cupcake, smeared with thick buttercream frosting and topped with chocolate sprinkles. She had purchased 2 bakery cupcakes, leaving one behind for Opal to discover. The first bite was the sweetest. Mama used to say you can't have your cake and eat it too. Then best to enjoy what you have while you have it. That's what I say. Nellie let the sweetness melt on her tongue, gathered every crumb from every cranny in the napkin folds, and dabbed the corners of her mouth with the napkin. When she finished, she looked up into the unsmiling eyes of the large woman sitting across from her. Was that good? Sourpuss. Delicious. Nellie turned her head toward the window and began to dream. What enjoyment life might hold for a progressive woman, gainfully employed in respectable work, able to travel through life on her own.
Wow. It sounds really, really good when you read it. I mean, it was wonderful when I read it, but
Thank you.
I could listen to you read all day.
Oh, well, thank you.
Okay, it's Cindy Avey.
Sydney.
Avey, of course. A novel, The Trials of Nellie Belle, and you can find it here in the Motherlode, Sonora.
Mountain Bookstore.
Mountain Bookstore, and Here's the Scoop over in Jamestown.
Libraries.
Libraries everywhere. And
Everywhere on the internet. Just
Yeah.
Google
Yeah.
The Trials of Nellie Belle and Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all those places will come up.
Amazon definitely, and Barnes & Noble, yes. So go out right away, pick up your copy of The Trials of Nellie Belle by Sydney Avey.